So there is a lot of interest for data. In this track, you will have a comprehensive vision of all these interests. First, we will have Ulrich from the FIWARE Foundation. Yeah, here. In a second, I will talk to you about all this tension between the privacy and the new infrastructures of data. How do we solve this tension? It's a new platform that they built that has the ambition to be the European platform, together with the American platforms and the ones in China. After that, we will have a discussion of one of the most interesting places in Europe, London. In London is where most of the more interesting things in AI is happening with companies like DeepMind and so on. London has a complicated structure. Then Theo and Onyeka, yeah, I did it well. They are trying to enlighten us on how to manage all this complicated case of aligning the boroughs with the city, or the cities around the city that make the hinterland, the big city, with the interests of the city, and how to produce policies that are effective not only in the small city but in the whole metro area, that are the policies that we need. Finally, we have a wonderful table with many of the CEOs from Lyon, from Montreal, CEOs from New Orleans, and so on. And I think I'm missing somebody. Montreal, New Orleans, and of course from Ulrich Foundation from New York that will enlighten us about different aspects of the policy. So thank you very much for coming. This is a very interesting track. And please, Ulrich, it's your time, it's your presentation. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Esteve, for the introduction. Very good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Fueling cities' growth strategies towards smart economies. Our digital life will gravitate around data and context information describing what's happening around us, when, where, and why. And this information will help us to create smart solutions in cities to, on the one side, reduce the cost of operating a city, and on the other side, to increase the quality of life of people living in the cities. And citizens, as well as cities, very often want to share data, to benefit from the data economy, to benefit from smart solutions, but to do that without regret. And this is the balance. We need to find a balance between data ownership, data security, data value on the one side, and interoperability, data exchange, sharing economy on the other side. And one prerequisite to do so is what is called, or what we call, data sovereignty. So the ability of an owner of a set of data to determine and to technically enforce what someone who gets access to his or her data is allowed and able to do with the data. For example, I give someone the 3D model of this pointer and allow him, because he bought a license, to print it 5 times on a 3D printer. After the 5th printing, this data set is not accessible for this person anymore. So this is a technical enforcement of data sovereignty. And there's an organization, and I'm also, beside my role as CEO of the FIWARE Foundation, founding member of the International Data Spaces Association, which provides a reference architecture, which provides interfaces, contractual framework, and some sample code. And there are 2 main value propositions of IDSA. The first one is to come up with functionalities to enable this data sovereignty, which I mentioned before. And on the other hand, the ability to connect different IoT platforms. In our case here in the Smart City contract, to connect different smart city platforms, or in an industrial environment, to connect different IoT platforms in industry. So data sovereignty and this connectivity, and the instrument to bring this connectivity is the so-called IDs Connector, which helps us to exchange data between different IoT platforms, between formally organized silos. So it is an instrument to break down these silos. To be able to use data as an economic asset. Today we have the situation that data are very often managed by what is called hyperscalers. In the B2C environment, in the business to consumer environment, mainly by companies coming from the US, companies coming from China, because we as Europeans, and I know here are global visitors, so here are people from China, from Asia, but we as Europeans, we lost the battle on B2C platforms to Google, Facebook, Alibaba, and others, you name it. And the target is finally to come up with solutions based on European values. European values means to enable and to make sure that data sovereignty is an integral part, that the owners of data can benefit from the use of their data, and that it is made sure that data security is maintained, and that such solutions are not accessible to agencies in different countries or to governance if they force the providers to do so. You know, for example, the Cloud Act in the US, the backdoors in China, and the approach to come up with a solution for that has been introduced 3 weeks ago, starting with the German government, and the project is called Gaia X. Maybe you haven't heard about Gaia X yet. As I said, it has been prepared by the German government, aligned before its announcement with the French government, and the ambition is to create a European-wide initiative to create a virtual hyperscaler based on European values, enabling data sovereignty, data security, and allowing the owners of data to make money out of their data and to enable a data economy according to European values. So it includes data protection, openness and transparency, digital sovereignty, as I mentioned, free market access, interoperability, and also user-friendliness. And the IDS concepts, which I introduced before, data sovereignty, IDS Connector, are the main basis for this concept of Gaia X. It will be discussed with the European Commission once it is implemented, the new Commission. And you might know that I used to work for Atos before I joined the FIWARE Foundation, and the former CEO of Atos is now French Commissioner for Digitization, Thierry Breton. He has also been involved into this activity before. And during the next month, I'm pretty sure you will hear a lot about Gaia X. And coming back to IDS, this IDS reference architecture and the concepts are implemented by different partners of the IDS Association, which was originally founded by 18 German companies. Now more than 100 companies from all over the world are part of IDS. Even companies from China, like Huawei. This architecture and these concepts are implemented by these companies. And one of the partners is also the FIWARE Foundation, and we are implementing an open source based version of this IDS concepts to help to break down these data silos, because very often, and coming back to the topic of smart cities here, data in cities are organized in silos, without the ability to share this data on common platforms. And the mission of FIWARE is to break down the silos and to make data available. So what is FIWARE? It is a framework of open source software components. So we are talking here about open source technology, freely available for everyone forever. Second is a standard interface, a standard API, which has been developed in the FIWARE ecosystem and is in the meantime the formal ETSI standard for context information management in smart cities. So it is the standard to get access to data and context information describing what's happening in a city. And finally, out of these software building blocks, which we are managing as a FIWARE Foundation, and we are organized similar as a Linux Foundation, OpenStack Foundation, Wikipedia Foundation, we are managing these software building blocks, and the main software building block is the FIWARE Context Broker, always in the center of a FIWARE-based solution, and you see a simplified architecture there on the right side. Several of these results became formal standards. I mentioned the Context Broker, which has been elected by all European member states to become a standard building block now recommended by the European Commission in a program called Connecting Europe Facility. So it is one of the big programs to create the digital single market of the European Commission. And here it enhances a formal list of 5 software building blocks. Now the FIWARE Context Broker is the CEF building block number 6, recommended by the European Commission to the member states to be used when creating digital solutions. Together with TM Forum, which is a global organization of telco and IT companies, we are creating and defining common data models. We have started this last year here at the conference, together with, at that time, 12 so-called front-runner cities, because it's a very much end-user-driven initiative. And finally, on the right side, this API, which has been defined in FIWARE, is now, as I mentioned, since January of this year, a formal standard for context information management. So we found an answer to the question how to transfer data and which data to be transferred. And this is used in a more detailed architecture for smart cities. So that's the FIWARE reference architecture for smart cities. In the center, you can see again the context broker. At the bottom, the NGSI-based interfaces to get access to data coming from sensors, from IoT networks, coming from other IT systems, coming from social media, coming from all the different sources of data describing what's happening in a city. And then on top, software building blocks like big data analytics, like artificial intelligence, like workflow engines, like functionalities to create user interfaces, including augmented reality, to create smart city platforms and to create smart solutions. And this is used to help cities on their digital transformation journey. Just briefly on these different steps. Very often there are first smart solutions in a city organized as silos. And the very first main decision a city has to make is the decision for a single platform, for a single integration platform. That's shown here on the left side, the smart city platform. It can be a decision for a closed source platform. It can be Cisco, Huawei, you name it, you see a lot of providers here. Or it can be a solution, a decision for an open source based platform like FIWARE. And then to decide for a common interface to break down the silos to make the data available. Second step, to agree on and to use common data models to make it much easier to replicate an existing solution from another city to my city and to avoid that the wheel is invented several times and simply to reduce cost for creating and operating a solution. Third step, make what we call right-time data available. We are not talking about real-time data on purpose, because to give you a simple example, to know the position of a bus in a city, it is sufficient to know this every 2 seconds. You don't need it every 10 milliseconds, which would be real time. So that's why we are talking about right time. And finally, once a city has been successful in creating its smart city platform, to provide this platform also to third parties in the city, to companies, to organizations in the city, to allow them to provide their data via the smart city platform and to monetize their data, finally to enable the data economy based on these concepts. That was too fast. 2 examples how it works. This is an example from Spain, not from a big city. It's from the region Badajoz, or the province Badajoz. Not very big cities in this province, although the province itself is the largest province in Spain. They decided to create a smart city platform based for the whole province and for all the cities in the province. In this case, it's the FIWARE platform is based on the platform Thinking City from Telefonica, but there are several other FIWARE-based platforms in the market available. And on this platform, there are 29 different solutions available: smart parking, smart waste management, smart lighting, smart tourism, and so on. And the cities can pick the solutions which they need for their purposes. And the platform itself, on the right side, provides data intelligence, provides KPI, provides benchmarking information to compare the performance of different cities, and data visualization, dashboards, and so on. So that's a very efficient way a region with not that big cities has decided to go for. And another, to talk again about data privacy, how to handle GDPR, is an example from the Netherlands. Here, the city of Eindhoven. That's the mayor of Eindhoven. And they have a street called Stratum signed with a very high crime rate in the past, because that's how the street looks like. 55 bars, 20,000 visitors, a lot of alcohol, high crime rate in the past. And what they did is they installed cameras analyzing the moving patterns of the people. No face recognition. The faces are pixeled within the camera, so no personal data is leaving the camera. It's GDPR conform. Second is sound analytics by microphones. There it is. Again, not speech recognition, no personalized data, but the kind of sound, the aggressivity level, the loudness of the sound. And finally, and third, social media analytics. So what's, in this moment in time, posted in Twitter and Facebook with relation to the street. And by combining this information, comparing it with historical data, using artificial intelligence, the system is able to predict critical situations in the street. So not only to identify critical situations, but to predict them. That means the police officer in the control room gets an information. In 3 minutes, it will become difficult in that part of the street. And he can now decide to either proactively send police people there or to increase the level of light in that part of the street. Eindhoven is the headquarters of Philips, so they have street lighting which is dimmable in different segments, and in more than 80% of the cases, it is sufficient to increase the level of light to de-escalate an upcoming critical situation. And the crime rate has been reduced by more than 50%, the transportations to hospital has been reduced, the damages in the bars have been reduced, and that's a good example how to use public surveillance here, but respecting GDPR rules and regulations. In the meantime, 140 cities in 30 different countries are creating their smart city based on FIWARE technology, not only in Europe. The technology and the standards have been born in Europe, but it's now used on a global scale. due to time reasons, I will skip this slide. Finally, why are cities going to this direction? The basic modules, these software modules which are provided, are open source, free of charge. There is a large community of software developers which are maintaining these software building blocks, and a large community of companies using these software building blocks, using the standards, using the reference architecture to create smart city solutions, platforms and solutions on top of the platform. With this being able to provide the lowest cost of ownership, and it is data sovereignty included, and finally, using open APIs and open data models, the so-called vendor lock-in is avoided. That's FIWARE, the open source platform for our smart digital future. Thank you very much. Thank you for your attention. And if you're interested to learn more about us, we have a booth. Maybe you've seen the nice Lego city over there. That's FIWARE, where we are demonstrating how it is used. Visit us at booth 421. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Ulrich. It looks like an impressive initiative for this of Gaia X.
It is.
And I hope that you engage in this initiative and you take the moment to look at it a little bit more closely. Now we have a wonderful panel with Theo Blackburn and Onyeka Onyekwelu. Please come to the stage. We are talking now about a special case that is the case of the city of London and its 32 boroughs.
Thank you.
Thank you. London has the ambition and has the power to become a powerhouse in digital activities, and now is shining in terms of possibilities, and with companies like DeepMind and all these efforts and so on. And both Theo and Theo Blackburn is the CEO, is the Chief Innovation Officer in London, but not only of the City of London, of all the boroughs of the City of London, of the Great London Authority, which is a big part of the city, one of the most impressive conurbations in Europe. And Onyeka has the responsibility to engage and align 32 boroughs that normally discuss with each other all day long. So it's a big task. Theo, please, can you enlighten us about what are you trying, what are your objectives, what do you want, what are your ambitions?
Sure, thank you, Esteve. It's a pleasure to be here today to talk about London's ambitions. I have been in post for 2 years as the Chief Digital Officer, working for the Mayor of London, and developed a Smarter London roadmap, something that previously London had a smart city plan that was developed at about the same time as the Olympics and dealing with the legacy of the Olympics. So it's like systems integration, and we did a lot of work around open data at the time, and Transport for London's unified API, which has enabled the flourishing of many, many applications to help people travel around London, is an example of our use of open data. So City Mapper, as many of you might have used today to navigate the complexity of the Barcelona subway system, is a good example of the product that was developed with the help of London and indeed other cities that have championed open data. So City Hall is sits above 32 boroughs, so it's part regional authority, part city administration. And one of our challenges in the first 3 years is to bring together the lower tier of government. Now, why this is important for general discussion rather than just a kind of, treatise on on London government and why it was set up that way, is that every city, whether it wants to collaborate internally with big departments, or it wants to collaborate with other cities or the regional government, I believe faces the same challenges that we do. How do you get common ways of working? How do you work together on data sharing? Not just open data, but secure data where appropriate, and as we've just heard, sensory data. So our job has basically been to fix the plumbing and to make sure that those foundations are in place for future innovation around data. So that's essentially our approach. Although London is, of course, a collection of really, really good pilots. We've got connected autonomous vehicles going around in several parts of the city. Does some great work with the NHS. We can't just be a collection of expensive pilots. We need to do something more fundamental. And if we are going to challenge the big problems, such as improving our air quality, changing our transport mix so more people use public transport or less polluting vehicles, then we need to start harnessing data. And the first stage in that is collaboration. And that's why we've set up the London Office of Technology and Innovation.
Wonderful. Onyeka, you have a tough job. You have to align 32 boroughs. Tell us about it. What is your experience in all this?
Yeah, so the London Office of Technology and Innovation is one of the results of the Smarter London plan that Theo alluded to. And we were set up really to help enable the boroughs to collaborate. And we have 16 boroughs of the 32 actually who are members of LOTI, as well as the GLA and London Councils, which is the representative body of the London local authorities. And what we do is try and work on projects that really speak to the real world needs of Londoners. And we have developed 6 work streams in order to do so. And I guess the most important work stream to talk about is data collaboration. And our aspiration with that is removing the barriers that exist to responsible data sharing. And one of the ways in which we have recently done so is through City Tools, which is a tool that we produced with Bloomberg, and it sort of makes it transparent as to what contracts exist between local authorities and private suppliers in terms of what technology actually powers the services that they provide to Londoners.
Mm-hmm. And I think, what's really fundamental is we think about a future of interoperability, and although each individual part of the public sector might have a real confidence about their own technology estate, if I was to look at London or look at the UK as a whole, our collective knowledge of the technology estate that stores all of this data and the future of that technology estate is something that we have more limited information around, just through the nature of legacy and the ways that we've done things. So City Tools and LOTI's work here has been absolutely fundamental in creating that first critical building block for that future work.
Sounds impressive. One of our objectives is citizens. At the end, we work for citizens. We try to produce products that engage citizens, that capture their imagination and willingness to collaborate and become citizens, even in this disconnected world of the 21st century. Can you tell us a little bit about that, about what are the initiatives that you have to engage citizens?
Well, I mean, Onyeka can expand on LOTI's work in this area, but I think it's fundamental when we look at open data, we look at the city's use of data, that we're not just talking about like a massive data lake that you're just pouring all of the data into, because fundamentally it's meaningful to citizens because we've understood their real world problems and we can explain why data is being shared. It's being shared to tackle air quality, it's being shared to tackle violent crime, and that we can have that conversation. And over the last 18 months, I think there's been like a really profound shift in London away from, traditionally we were kind of doing open data, and now we're really exploring questions where data is a lot more personal. We're engaging with a public engagement exercise. We've got a public engagement exercise with the National Health Service and citizens about when it's appropriate to share people's medical data for the prevention of illness. We're talking, we've piloted and now have in operation the use of people's mobile Wi-Fi data as they pass through tube stations in London, so that we can improve our understanding of overcrowding on the tube network, and other features which are absolutely critical to the London Underground system. We've polled Londoners on their views of data, which was really interesting because, there was, I think, as the speaker originally said, the first speaker said, that there's a kind of acceptance that data should be shared. It's just it depends on the use case. And broadly speaking, the more personal your data is, the more equivocal people got. That's common sense. But they also told us that they really wanted people to tell them what their data was being shared with and who they trusted. So this kind of groundwork has actually given us much more confidence to proceed with data projects. And I think it's critical that cities exercise that kind of digital leadership.
Yeah, I mean, the work that we do, we try and engage with the frontline workers first, because we don't believe in the double diamond for the double diamond's sake. We believe that it has to be an outcomes-based solution. So we adopt the outcomes-based methodology. We look at what the real-world outcome is first, and then work our way backwards and discuss what the barriers are to sharing data, and then talk about the solutions afterwards. And that's really helped, because working with frontline workers, they are the ones with the experience of how the data could help and what the good use of that data would be. And engaging with them early has just been fundamental to our work, really.
That's great. One of the problems that we all have in these cities is that many of the problems that we try to solve cannot be solved in a city. You need the metro area. You don't have the competence, you don't have, so there is a huge need of collaboration, of sitting and talk, of alignment. Many times governments that are of different colors, with different objectives, with different incentives, with different motivations that want to address different needs of the system. That in London probably is even bigger than in other places, but we have that everywhere in Europe, and I think everywhere in the world. But now you have this boroughs that is kind of medieval structure that makes things a little bit more complicated. You have 16 boroughs, you have the GLA, the Greater London Authority, and also probably you are talking with the other 16 others and so on. What are your steps to try to align policies and have a common ground on the policies, and that all this doesn't be seen as a chaos, but as a unified direction?
I think at first we try to acknowledge that London is fragmented. There's no point dancing around that. But it's important from the outset to have set out what those work streams are, because then we have the goals that we're always aspiring to and working towards. And everything that we do, we try and align to those goals, as well as that adopting the local digital declaration. We ensure that there is a lead borough as well as supporting boroughs on every project. And in that way, we can ensure that there's collaboration, or there's the sense of collaboration on each project before moving forward. So we don't move forward without the borough's buy-in, really. And that ensures that we have some level of success.
So Tom Loosemore, who was one of the directors of the Government Digital Service when it was in its sort of full prime, gave a definition of digital, which I think is really important. He said it's applying the culture, practices and processes and technologies of the internet era to respond to people's raised expectations. And I think that's been a really critical kind of way of thinking for us, which is like, it sits behind quite a lot of the declarations that we've made and ways of binding people together. It says to people that it's not about just about the platform and the technology. It's about your way of working. It's about you working in an iterative way. It's you working in the open. It's you adopting a different stance to data sharing. And we have something that I think our approach in London has been, in the past it's been really easy to kind of sit back and go, this is obviously what you should do, and sort of shout at public services and put down a framework or a rule, where half the people in the room are kind of folding their hands and just kind of going, well, I don't get it and I don't want to be part of this. But working with the coalition of the willing and creating a sense of it's special to be part of this group through LOTI's work and through our shared principles, I think has enabled a sense of momentum that we haven't had before in our city of working together.
Oh, that's wonderful. Now it's your turn. I'm sure that you have lots of questions. We want to have a dialogue, a conversation, not only me asking questions. So anybody who wants to have its voice, please go there. You have some mics there. and we will have some answers. Don't be shy. It's a conversation on this area. Come on, go ahead.
I'm Panu Kalliokoski from the city of Helsinki, Finland. I'd like to know where the City of London is now directing its efforts in participation in open source software, because that's an important building block in building an open data ecosystem.
Do you want to go back to City Tools? I mean, effectively, our legacy in our city has been, and our deep suspicion about our technology estate is it's dominated by big suppliers. So when Onyeka was talking about the City Tools product, it allows a service. It allows us to understand what the actual technology estate is, and it is effectively dominated by suppliers and large suppliers. We have incidentally and at times produced open source solutions and want to do more of that. But we cannot strategically move towards a different technology mix without first doing that critical groundwork that LOTI is doing. Do you want to? Yeah, so that's kind of like where we're at the moment. We would like to, because I think it's not just an IT question, it's a civic question for leaders to talk about, and for too long it's been an IT question. You know, we note the progress in Barcelona and in some other cities as well, Amsterdam, and we do actually have a city-to-city partnership with Helsinki, so we've got a way of channeling all their goodness in as well.
We still have time for more questions. Anybody who wants to know something about London, please go ahead.
Thank you, Bronwyn from Australia. I'm interested in one of the things that I've seen in Australian context, but I guess all through the travels, is that there is a big, I guess, capacity gap between metropolitan councils or city governments, and then regional, rural, and remote. And when you think about where they are on the sort of the digital transformation journey, a lot of them have much lower levels of maturity. So on one hand, we're talking about doing some really sexy, cool stuff with smart cities and AI and all this, and on the other hand, I have to like print out a form and go to register my dog or my, something. So there's this tension between this super and then also challenging the data, the use of data and ethics, and they're trying to navigate all this at the same time when they still have very low levels of digital maturity.
So with the work of LOTI, we've tried to keep it diverse as we can. Our portfolio is as diverse as possible. So we do have Fix the Plumbing projects, looking at information governance, looking at seamless Wi-Fi across our boroughs to help with sort of resilience of the offices. And at the same time, we are working on projects to do with Internet of Things, to do with assistive technology, because that is the future. And I think you do have to keep that balance, because, as you say, there are leaders who are just flying ahead, and you do have to ensure that you are engaging with those who are flying ahead and being innovative, as well as ensuring that you're pulling up the boroughs who are struggling, if I can say so, to keep with the rest of the others.
Yeah, and I think a really important principle that we have in LOTI and lies behind what we call the local digital declaration is showing your workings and working in the open. So it's not a question of like coming along to events like this or other events and just saying like, look at this cool pilot that we're doing. It's telling people how we did it, telling people in real terms about the challenges, and it's sort of like keeping it real. I think it's really, really it's really important just to promote, but not be so promotional in this game, because there are hard miles, But we firmly think that there's talent everywhere in local government, regardless of the maturity of their leadership or some of their systems. It's just how it's mobilized.
Yeah.
Great. We still have time for one more question. Anybody who... Yes, great, thank you.
So I'm sorry about my voice, but I'm intrigued about the benefits that London boroughs receive through their membership of LOTI, and perhaps how you're thinking about growing this coalition of the willing that you referred to, and how you can help mobilize boroughs that perhaps aren't currently members of LOTI, but are considering membership.
At the moment, our focus isn't to grow membership. We want to work with the coalition of the willing and the able. So I think that's our main focus at the moment. In terms of how we ensure that they have, return on investment per se, it's picking things that speak to their priorities, picking projects that speak to their priorities, but also ensuring that we do the hard work for them. So we do the hard thinking, the strategizing, the workshop planning, and we try to engage wider than just the senior leadership. We, as I said, engage with frontline workers, whether it be information governance officers, data protection officers, could be social workers when we're talking about assistive technology. So we do try and do sort of the wider lateral thinking and make it easier to then bring forward proposals that would make their jobs easier in time. And I think that's the real benefit of LOTI.
And I think looking towards the priorities of the Mayor of London, Sadiq Khan, and the future, our ability to more confidently mobilise data from boroughs, participating boroughs, in the absence of like a national data strategy and framework, our ability to do that, actually, even if we had one, is based upon people's trust and common purpose. So we see the future of data use in London as not perhaps a central city, sort of data platform. There will be a central way of doing things, a much more federated network where City Hall sets standards and common ways of doing things. Data holders, exist in the way that they do now, but with much closer bonds to City Hall. And by that, we think we can extend it beyond the public sector to the wider ecosystem, which is just so fundamentally important when we're looking at, the air quality, transport issues, preventative health, other environmental issues. So we're currently conducting a discovery exercise with the Open Data Institute on how that platform approach or platform's approach might work, how we can develop data store as the central register of sort of metadata, telling people where the data's held, and that will move towards a technical exercise later next year, so that we can, on the 10th anniversary of the data store, one of the first created in the UK, is on the 7th of January. So it would be fitting for us to actually now move into a new era starting from next year. And crucial to that, we could not do that 2 years ago without having the infrastructure of Onyeka's team and the willing participation of boroughs and public agencies that shared our hunger.
Wonderful, thank you. Now we have a 15-minute break, a little bit less than 15-minute break. You have to come back, or you have to stay here at 15:45. And now we will have a panel given by Marta Gauceran, that is here, a senior consultant in Antiverti, one of the organizations that is, or the organization that is behind all this. It's a wonderful panel. It's with Toronto, with Lyon, Montreal, Bloomberg, and so on, New Orleans. So don't miss it. But before that, let's thank very much Onyeka and Theo, and thank you very much.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. So we start this second segment of this session on data governance and principles and digital rights. So it is now common sense. We all know that there is this trend of cities upscaling their data capabilities, right? So data governance has sort of become a mainstream discussion, a hot topic. At the same time, city governments are deploying sensors in public space. They also see value in collecting data from its citizens, right? But of course, this comes with some challenges, right? So before rushing into installing sensors all over the place, we must respond to fundamental questions about how do we govern this data, no? Questions about governance. Of data. So in this sense, having a data governance strategy seems a wise way to go, right? But what principles should inform those data strategies? What are the challenges of implementing these data strategies? What are the key elements any data strategy should have? In this session, we will have some views from 3 different cities, Lyon, cities or local governments, so Métropole Lyon. We will have also Montreal, and we'll have also the city of New Orleans, and also a panelist from Bloomberg Associates. They will provide their views on how can we build better data strategies and what principles should we keep in mind whenever we think about data governance. I will invite the first 2 panelists from Lyon Métropole. They are Maria Inés Leal, who is the Innovation Project Manager of Lyon Métropole. She's also an expert on data governance and digital rights, and also Nicolas Pernaut, who is the software architect of Lyon Métropole. The floor is yours.
Hello. Hello, it's working? Yeah. Thank you very much. We are very happy to be here to present you. So just a few words on Lyon Métropole. We are a local government with 59 cities and 1.4 million inhabitants. So just a brief, we will speak today about personal data specifically, and a small story. I had the chance to have 2 passports here. So I had the chance to share 2 different kinds of personal data when I travel. And the thing is that all of us, we often do these kind of things also online. We change our identity, we change our personal data. Not all the time we put the same personal data, because maybe we don't want to receive spams, we don't want to receive unwanted emails. And why is that? We have a distrust that it's growing. Now with GDPR, every citizen, every user is asking themselves the same questions. What are the institutions, what are the private sector and the public institutions doing with our data? Basically, why is that? We don't really have a choice. If we want to access a service, we need to provide the data, right? We don't have control over what happens with this data afterwards. And there is opacity. We don't know why. So with the smart city, there is the base of the smart city is eventually the data. We have a very mature open data strategy in Lyon Métropole, but there is a question of what do we do with personal data? And with new digital services that are offered to the citizen, we are asking ourselves a question: how will provide pertinent, relevant services to the citizens, also with transparency standards and respecting their human digital rights? Sorry. So we started a project that is called Mes Enfants in 2016, and this project is based in a new paradigm, a concept that is called My Data, that is called self-data also in French, that it's the collection, the use, and the sharing of personal data by and for individuals under their complete control and designed to fulfill their own needs and aspirations. We started this project, we keep going on after 2018, and there is also in a global scale this organization, My Data organization, that is spreading this paradigm, this new concept, how we give the power, how we empower the citizens to regain the control over their personal data. And we at Métropole de Lyon, we have 3 main stakes of top priority that are, first, co-creation. data for common good. That means to put together public, private, and individuals to share common objectives and in a very practical way, just to put the data in the center, that is the citizen, for him to access services, and for him to decide if he wants to share it to us to build our public policies. Second priority is we want to provide individual experiences, empower individuals in a common public values, with common public values. And finally, our third stake is personal management system. That is just basically a new breed of IT that will allow us to do all this, respecting GDPR. So these are our three main stakes, and we'll just go briefly in one of our case studies. We have many, but because of the time, we'll just present one. We've all have seen this. Energy services that help you trim your energy consumption, your bills, and not all of them, they work. So why is that? We see many obstacles. Mainly, behavioral change is complex, and we need to propose and provide a service that is as personal as possible in order for the citizen to understand his energetic consumption. And that's why my data, it's a great way, because he is in control of all this. And I'll let now Nicolas explain you in more detail what it is.
Okay, thanks a lot. So we'll have a quick demo of the application in this current state, but before a little bit about the tech behind. So we use an open source personal information management system, which is called COSI. It's available on cosi.io. There is a great documentation. It's on GitHub as well, so everyone can use it. And we're very fond of open source at Lyon Métropole because we think that it enables us to digital sovereignty and it enables us to disseminate and replicate everything we do elsewhere. So we use that product. That product is production ready. It's technically mature. It's developed in Go. It's made to scale, and it scales very well. And it provides a service platform. So in the current data strategy, you pull the user data and use it into an application. What we provide is your personal space, and the user data stays in this personal space. And we just allow the user to pull an application. That's not us who pull the data, that's the user who pull our application. And he can run the application and cross the data and make value with that data. So that's kind of a very different paradigm about what is done today. So far, we've done a very quick proof of concept of the application. It's technically all the groundwork is done, all the heavy lifting is done, because we can get the data with connectors. We can run a very simple application, and in the future steps, we'll do a lot more about user experience, obviously. So we start by creating an instance of COSI. It's a personal encrypted instance. No one can see what's in it. It's very personal space. And it can be run at home in a Raspberry Pi, for example, or on a federated infrastructure operated by Lyon Métropole, for example, or any government. But even if it's made, if it's run on a common infrastructure, it's still personal and encrypted. So I just start an instance for SCEWC, and now I'm connecting all the data source. So EGL, it's a water provider. So I just input the credentials for my water provider account, and it's getting my data, and it will get my data every. Oh, something happened.
What's happening? ¿Qué está pasando?
I guess we don't have more time.
Okay. So just
Okay.
In the meanwhile, so it's basically there is connectors that we need to set up to get some data. For the moment, we use basic login password credentials, and in a few times we'll use OAuth and IDs Connector stuff to get the data more comfortably with single sign-on. Oh.
Okay.
Okay, here it is again.
We'll fast forward because of the time.
Okay. So we got the data, and now we are showing all the data in a very simple way for the time being, that is load profiles. But we can see that in the same application, we've got all the user data, being the electricity data, gas data, and water data. And it's still in a personal space. It's not shared with everyone, even with us as a local government. And we can now cross that data and make value about it. The last piece of the demo is just to show you that in the COSI ecosystem, there is a lot of already made applications and connectors that can help gather some information, even with Google and Facebook information. So that's already a mature ecosystem that you can already use at your project.
Just to quickly conclude, our goal is to create a new trust relationship with the user with these kind of systems where he's the only one that can access his data, he's the one that controls it, and we are there to provide the services that he can access if he wants, and then we can integrate him to share his data in an anonymized way to create our public policies. Thank you.
Hello? Okay, it's working. Thank you very much, Maria and Nicolas, and apologize for this technical failure. We had it here. So key messages to take home of the experience of Lyon Métropole. So there is a new paradigm change, what they presented, very interesting, very worth considering. Maybe there are some cities in the room that are interested on learning more about that, and we have our speakers there that later will be very happy to reply to any answers. So the key question here is how to empower citizens and build trust relations with citizens at the same time. And this new paradigm, what it entails, it's don't pull the data to the application, but rather push the application to personal data. That's the key message that we need to bring home. But we have another fantastic panelist today. He's François Croteau. He's the Deputy Mayor of Montreal in charge of smart cities and the digital city, information technologies, innovation, and organizational performance. He's also in charge of higher education. And he's also a mayor of one of the boroughs in Montreal, the borough of Rosemont-La Petite-Patrie. François will basically focus his presentation on how to build a new data infrastructure in 6 steps for the city of Montreal. The floor is yours. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for welcoming me today and talk about the strategy of Montreal and as a model of governance, ethic governance for data. Before I talk about the central topic of my presentation, just put a specific context of how we work in Montreal, how the governance, the basic governance of Montreal is quite complicated. But it's not so complicated after the presentation of London. You're going to see that it's quite similar. Montreal is a decentralized city, so we have 19 boroughs who have same kind of power as the city. So as a mayor of borough, I have similarly the same power as a mayor of a city as a Barcelona. So we control the zoning, the cleaning of the space, the public space, the collect of the garbage, the sports, the culture, everything is managed. The construction and repair of the infrastructure is called from the borough. So we have a lot of power. So when you think about a strategy, a digital strategy as in Montreal, you have to take in part all the structure of the city. Of course, you have 19 boroughs, but you have also a lot of services in the central of the city. So it's very difficult to manage all that kind of structure, but of course, you have to think about what kind of services you want to put in. So a few years ago, Montreal have a big strategy, a specific strategy for smart city, but there hasn't a data culture inside the organization. So all the services working by themselves, they have their own strategy for manage the data, and there's no link between all the services to exchange the data. So it's very difficult to use the data as a strategic tools to give better services for citizens. So we have to think about how we're going to do it in the future in Montreal, but before we have to put the basic of a real strategy and a real plan for a real data culture in the city. So to be sure that everything is going fine, and we have some standards who can be shared in different services and boroughs of the city, we have to talk about exactly what is the goal of the city. Smart City talk about tech. We just talk about a lot of tech during that beginning of this session. But the center point is how we can increase the quality of life of every citizen in the city. That's our goal. The goal is give services to citizens. But the other point is what we have to promote. The view of the municipal servant, the view of the politician, of what the citizen really needs as a digital services. And before, the culture of the organization is mostly promoted by the politic and the vision of the organization, not exactly what is the needs of the citizen. So to get that and put the citizen at the center of our strategy and the numeric and digital strategy, we have to focus to see how we can have the citizen inside a strategy, and the citizen can help us to define the digital strategy and the data culture of the city. So we have 6 steps or 6 basic things to do before go forward with various of digital services as the internet, if you want to permit online, if you want to share between different services, collect data to increase mobility, and etc. So first thing, we work with the city of Nantes in France to work on a data charter with 5 principles, who is very important. And that 5 principles, you can see it's inspired by the City for Digital Rights Charter that we signed years ago. So human rights guarantee, general interest and public tools, good equity in access to resources and services, digital sovereignty, of course, and right to experiment. The original thing that we've done with the charter, it's not to build inside the organization. Are there technical problems? You see, when you depend on technique and technical, you have to focus on human. So I'm going to continue to talk with you. So the things that we put in is to work with citizens and the community to get the right charter for Montreal and the right charter to respond to the needs of the citizen and the community. So what we've done, we write a proposition of charter on a Google Doc, and we put online. And we ask to the citizen, the community, just to comment and give them the opinion of what they think about the proposition of the charter. We had more than 200 comments of citizens who participated on that document. After that, we have a lot of work to do to just put all these comments and reflection of the citizen on the bonification of this charter. With that, we work with researchers from university and ethics to know exactly what is the right things to do. Of course, we work with other government too, because when you put a project like this, you have to manage with a framework, a legal framework, who managed by the state, who give you some certain of power that you don't have or you have. So of course you have a culture of where you're living to manage. It can be different from cities to another, or certain part of the city can be different. So the needs can be different, so you have to manage that. So it's important to us to build that charter with citizens, with the community, with the person who have very big interest in that kind of project. After that, that tools can be the promotion of new data culture in the organization, and of course to ensure the citizen that we're going to manage their data and the data of the city very with precaution, with very fearless transparency, and for the good. So it's important to give the information of what we're going to collect as an information, what we're going to do with it, where we're going to put it in, and are we going to let all the time in the server, or are we going to just delete it after the usage? So it's important to tell that to the citizen, but it's important to know what citizen want exactly us to do with the data and for which kind of services. So that's the basic point that we have to put in before a large strategy and standards of data culture in the organization. And I don't have my time, so I don't know exactly how many times I speak. Just okay, perfect. After that, we talk about a lot of artificial intelligence and how artificial intelligence can help us to increase services. But we know the basic of artificial intelligence, it's data. So if you don't have the basic to protect how we can use the data, it's impossible to give guarantee to the citizen that everything is going to be fine. So the collectivity in Montreal just work on a Montreal Declaration responsible of AI that we signed. So to promote the responsible usage of the AI in Montreal. So we have a lot of research center in Montreal on AI, specifically on ethics. So for us, it's very important because when we sign that, all the time that we're going to develop algorithm for a certain kind of services, we're going to put online the algorithm and all the codes to share with other cities and share with the citizen to give them exactly what we're using to increase the services. So for us, it's very important because in an optic of democracy, transparency, and just help citizens to have confidence on what we're doing with algorithm, with AI and data, we have to be every time transparent. The other thing is, it's three, it's not two, ethical governance of Internet of Things. Of course, we know it. If we want to collect data on public space to increase mobility, to increase all the services, we have to collect a lot of data. And to give right services with AI, we have to collect massive data. If the learning machine have to go to work well, we have to collect a lot of data. So right now, what we're doing, we gone in a call for tender to have a model of governance of IoT in the organization of Montreal. Because right now, some of the services just install capture, camera, and everything, but with no direct link, with no standard. So everybody's doing everything about that. So it's important to us to have that strategy, to put it in and have the right model of governance. Of course, that's linked with directly with the doesn't work. Directly linked with the future 5G system, because if you want to increase, okay, it's not working. So if you want to increase collect of data in the public space in the future, 5G is going to have a big impact, a huge impact for a city. So to get that 5G, we have before put a lot of things. For example, we work in open sources system. We have a strategy with a data policy with a new, who's going to be implemented in 2020 next year's. For example, the last platform of open data was very hard to use it, and so we want to increase that culture data in the community, but in the organization too. So if the public servant have to get the opportunity to use data, they have to get the positive point to use it. So we're going to launch a new app, open data action next year. The new policy development of free software is implemented. Right now we have 48 tools of open sources who can be used in Montreal. And we publish the codes online to share with other cities in Quebec. You can use it for their advantage. And finally, next year, we're going to launch a 5G urban lab in Montreal with the collaboration of all the company who's going to implement the 5G in the city, the health public officer, and all the system to test how this new technology can help us to increase the services and how far we can go with the 5G. So as you can see, we have to develop a whole strategy to be sure that if we want to go forward and faster with a new data culture in the organization, we have to put that kind of step and basic before, because actually we didn't have that, all the things that you can see right now. So in 1 year, 1 year ago, we didn't have that things, but in 1 year, we construct all these things. In 1 year, we have now a real culture data strategy in Montreal. And of course, it helps us to go faster in the future and be a better, smart strategy, but important for us, a real democracy for transparency for citizens. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Francois. So if 1 year you got to do all this, I cannot imagine what the future looks for Montreal. Very bright future, no doubt. So our next speaker today, she comes from the city of New Orleans. She's Kimberly LaGrue. She's the Chief Information Officer of the city of New Orleans, and she's representing the first female mayor of the city of New Orleans, LaToya Cantel. She has more than 20 years of experience in city government, in modernizing systems, and she's a broadband adoption advocate. She will present on how to develop relevant civic technology and how this led us to the data principles, the data standards that we have today. Kimberly, the floor is yours.
Great. Good afternoon. So I agree with my panelists on just about everything they said, but leave it to New Orleans to come and tell a story and not make a good technical presentation. If I were a better musician, I'd probably sing you a song, but since I'm not, I'm just going to present the story of New Orleans and our recovery. So for New Orleans, developing civic technology kind of came about organically, and it was based out of a need to recover our city after Hurricane Katrina. So we used this actually started before civic tech was a thing, before civic tech was civic tech, but we needed to use data and information to aid and accelerate the recovery of our city. So I'm going to discuss with you or tell you the story, the challenges that we faced along the way, the lessons we learned, how we got to the data standards that we have today, and where we consider ourselves in the privacy and best practices at this point. So how civic tech aided in our recovery. About 2006, we started getting federal mandates and looked at funding from the government. 4 years later, we were still moving through how we were going to get those federal dollars and that assistance into the city to actually rebuild it. With the second administration, or with the new administration that came in 2010, we found ourselves kind of in the same place that we were in 2006. So this journey started then, but we were pretty late in that process. But we knew that one of the biggest problems the city faced, and from public opinion, was blight. We had a lot of housing that had not been recovered, and we had property owners that did not live in the city any longer, or they were displaced. So we needed a way to aggressively manage our property and enforce codes that made owners take responsibility for their property. So our private citizens began to collect data because the city was frankly taking too long. So we had multiple data sets that existed, and they existed separate from the city because private citizens were very concerned about the recovery of the property next to theirs. So they went to the mortgage office and found out who owned that house next to theirs that did not have the grass cut or was not being recovered, and they were coming to the city with that information. But the interesting part about that was they started to develop more data than we had. So at some point, we had to ask the citizens for the data. So there was a data set that we were maintaining, and we literally found out that there was a tech developer who had better data than we did, and the data was traveling through the city of New Orleans. We literally had to track down this guy and ask for that information. He became the leader of our Resilience and Recovery Department, our Safety and Permits and Code Enforcement Office. So from this, we had to develop an application that gave us some transparency. What we learned from that is get a good set of data, right? And we worked with that set of data, and we knew our citizens were invested because they told us, you need to go and get this if you want to get this done correctly. From this, we developed a program, and we used Domino's Pizza has a pizza tracker, and it tells you where your pizza is, whether it's still being made or if it's in the car. We developed a program called Blight Status. It let us be transparent and accountable to our citizens who were very demanding to know where their property was or the property next to them was in this recovery process. And this is what we created. We developed this along with Code for America. We were engaged with our civic tech groups or technology groups in the city, and it allowed the residents to go online. This was 2010, 2011, to go online, put in a property address, and find out where it was in the code enforcement process. That was a great tool for us, and we considered it the beginning of successful civic tech engagement. So what we learned was data integrity was important. We needed our citizens engaged, but this process needed to be transparent and iterative. We didn't get this right at the beginning, and we had to create a process that the citizens actually came in and made us answer for the things that we were doing. So Blight Status was a monthly program, and they let us have it for a very long period of time. But these partnerships, through that, we developed very valuable partnerships with our community. This led to a second project called Adopt a Catch Basin. So water is still really important to us, and in our recovery, we knew we needed to also manage the way water flowed. So catch basins for us are like stormwater drains, and we needed to help the citizens manage those pieces of property in front of their houses. Clean catch basins mean that the water doesn't back up and it flows freely, so it helps prevent flooding. Along with our GIS partners, good set of data, making sure that information was correct, we developed a tool that allowed a resident to adopt a catch basin. You can name it. You can say, this is the catch basin in front of my house. They make a geographical selection here, and then we engage them. We wanted to be able to send them reminders, a flood is coming, storm's coming. Have you cleaned your catch basin? Does it work? Could you let us know? One thing we found out, though, through this process is the citizens we were asking them to do our work. So we had to change or change the public opinion there or mitigate what the citizen thought about the perception that they got from our application. And the lesson that we learned from that is to be very communicative and very deliberate about how we work with our resident population and to make sure the work was relevant and clearly communicated. So what that got us to was some standards for civic tech and other applications that we develop. They are related to our business operations when possible. We use a score, and the privacy relevancy related to the data we'd like to open, we consider opening as much of the data as we possibly can. So that score helps us now in ways of determining whether or not the data should be open, whether or not it's private data, and sometimes whether or not it should be monetized. As we are now 2019, 2020, and monetization of data is a very controversial subject. We have to use this matrix to tell us when we're okay, and use those standards and make them available to the community. So we are actively engaged with our tech community. Code for America and Sun Life Foundation publishes a set of data standards. So from this, we can say, look, these are the standards that we use, and publish them to our civic tech community, but also our residents. That led us to here, which is our data-driven portal. And it's a typical open data portal, but what we knew was we needed to be very upfront and say these are the data principles by which we're guiding our work. And if you want to engage with the city, this is why this open data is important and how. And that is protecting citizen data is really important to us. So building our partnerships now, we're moving to our libraries and our academia, making sure that we share those resources and knowledge with them. And personally identifiable information, we make sure that if another municipality, we reach out to our regional partners to see if other municipalities have done the work that we're doing. But we are looking at personal identifiable information and saying if there are 2 more pieces of that information, we have to find a way to anonymize it to protect our citizens. So that's kind of where we are in our story right now, and thank you for your time.
Thank you very much, Kimberly. So our next panelist is Todd Asher. He's Deputy Principal of the Media and Technology Practice at Bloomberg Associates, which is an organization working on more than 15 cities worldwide. He also served as the first Deputy Commissioner for the New York City Mayor's Office of Media and Entertainment, and in that position to help it to appoint the first Municipal Chief of Digital Officer. Todd will explain us a little bit more about the importance of building trust among the city and the people living in the city, and he will also present or provide more information on the city's coalition of digital rights that probably most of these people in the room already know. The floor is yours.
Okay, as usual, I'm going to be very tall for this podium, so let me know if you can't hear me. My name is Todd, and I am a recovering civil servant, having spent 6 years in New York City government under the Bloomberg administration. It's been 6 years since that term ended, and it struck me as I was listening to all the presentations from people who continue to work for cities, what a hard job it is working in city government. They can't say that to you because it's their job and it's their responsibility. But I can tell you, from the time that I spent working in city government and then working with cities around the world right now, that these are really hardworking people who work under incredibly difficult circumstances. It's an avalanche of work. All of the constraints that you have in public service for very good reasons to protect citizens and public dollars are quite onerous. Procurements can take a year, again, in order to protect public dollars. Hiring of staff can be very difficult. Unlike the private sector, you can't produce revenue while in city government. I know everyone's worried about their tax bills going up, but when you're working in a city government, at least a Western democracy, you can just charge the amount of money that it takes to fulfill a service. So the more you fulfill the service, the more you bring in, but again, it just covers all of your costs. So I think given those constraints, the work that all of these folks do is really admirable, and I remind myself every day that I'm very proud and lucky to be able to work with people like these. So everything I'm about to show you right now is work from people who are CIOs or chief digital officers or others. Now I'm in the sort of nonprofit private sector business. Bloomberg Associates is the nonprofit consulting arm of the Bloomberg Philanthropies. So we're about 40 people based in New York, but often traveling around the world. We've worked in 15 cities over the course of the last 6 years. Typically 2 years in each city, with the idea of helping to create innovation programs and to help city governments to create programs that will help residents. My area is in media and digital strategies, but I have colleagues that are working in social services, travel and tourism, transportation, really runs the gamut of everything that you might find in a traditional city hall, with the exception of education and policing, which tend to fall outside of the purview of mayors in certain parts of the world. Let's see, I brought my own, there we go. The most important thing for us in our work here and when I worked in city government was building trust with residents, trust with colleagues. And again, the operation of government can be quite time consuming. But transparency in the work is really important, and you see a trend in that now for the last many years, again in North America and Europe and South America, where most of our work is going on. But also, in addition to transparency, communication is hugely important. City governments usually spend a lot of time and all of their money executing on the charge that they have and delivering the service that they need to benefit residents. And there's not money that's set aside for marketing. There's not a firm that's out there that's doing the tweeting for you and promoting the work that you do. So it's really incumbent on cities to think differently about what they do, but also to make sure that they're sharing that with residents. As many of you might know, Barcelona, Amsterdam, and New York were all part of the Cities Coalition for Digital Rights. This was launched last year with the 3 cities as founding members. It's subsequently now 36 cities have signed on. The tenets are ones that we believe in: universal access to the internet and digital literacy, important for everyone to have access to the internet. Privacy and data protection and security are of course paramount and always front of mind for city governments when they're launching programs, but on the day-to-day maintenance of them. Transparency and accountability, and of course non-discrimination of data, content, and algorithm. Participatory democracy, incredibly important for many of the city partners that we work with, including cities like Paris. Diversity and inclusion, important everywhere that we go. And having open and ethical standards. All of these are things that we keep front of mind and that we believe that cities should all opt into and participate in. Theo will know this. It's a product of his, launched in London, and really a fun way to draw attention to the use of public data. And so the idea, if I'm paraphrasing it well, and I lived in London many, many years ago, but I used some common tube routes to get from home to work. You plug in the tube stop that you get on at, you plug in the one that you get off at, and you get to find out how many other people share your subway route. So a little bit of data, a little bit of interest. It was a great way for the press to cover the fact that the city is responsibly using data. And you get a opt-in option, which is a nice way to let you know that if you want to contribute your data for public good, you can. If you prefer and you just want the utility of the app, then you can move forward and get the results without contributing. But this is one of the ways that cities can make the engagement with citizens more interesting, to give them a feeling of what their data is being used for. Also, you heard earlier, if you were here when Theo and Onyeka were speaking, the creation of the London Office of Technology and Innovation is an extremely innovative way to work with local government. We work in cities who are part of counties and states in the US. We work with cities that are also in capital cities in places in Europe. And the levels of government don't always coordinate because there's a different geographic footprint, there's a different level of responsibility. What London has done through Theo's digital strategy and the work that Eddie Copeland and Onyeka are doing with the London Office of Technology and Innovation is a really great way to make sure that local governments don't replicate services that they're creating, that the public dollars that are spent in one part of the city can benefit residents that live in other parts of the city. And that can be through more efficient delivery of service, better service, but also less expensive service. Then that money is going to be used for other services that can improve the lives of people who live in that city. City Tools, which was also mentioned, we created a global version that looked at the tools that 22 different cities around the world are using to do public communications using digital technologies, how they're starting to use things like artificial intelligence. And this became the baseline for some of the work that was done for City Tools London, which looks across the 32 boroughs in the City of London, in London, to look at the tools that they're using, the contracts that they have in place, so that they're not replicating the wheel, that they're utilizing the fact that they have increased buying power and increased pressure on vendors to deliver good service to each of the CIOs. And I think this issue of service is important for, many of us have come to this room because we work in commercial enterprises. I'm in a nonprofit, a lot of you are in government. I think it really is through partnership that we can make a difference. And I think the private sector has a large role in making sure that standards are open and that data is fairly used, and that cities are able to benefit from access to their own data, sometimes where vendors will sell it back to us. One example of a project that's of interest to us, we're working with the city of Paris, is called LOTI. It's the original name for the Roman city that stood where Paris does now. And it's an open source platform fully developed within the city over the last 15 years. It's a platform that allows the development of many of the city's websites and apps, about 350 of them. Some of them you may know, like the participatory budget, which in Paris is the largest in the world, where they put $100 million, euros worth of investment into their participatory budget, so citizens can vote on improvements to their city. But they also operate a data portal, Dans Ma Rue, where you will file any of the complaints that you might have as a citizen about a pothole or a broken light, any sort of service. Not the metropolis of Lyon, but the city of Lyon also uses LOTI. And they have really carefully managed the data. It's fully GDPR compliant. All of the data is in separate areas, so none of it is merged together. And the software and the systems which they manage in their own data center is highly secured using international standards. So in summary, I think the thing that's really important is that cities are responsible in the way that they operate and the way that they treat the citizens' data. I think that it's important that they maintain trust, and that's really done through continued dialogue and proving that the public data that they do collect is for the benefit of the people who live in those cities. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Todd. Can I ask our panelists to join me on stage? We don't have much time, but I think it's good to give you the opportunity to ask any question you might have. Is there any questions for any of our panelists? If not, I can start by one question. And you have time to. It's your opportunity in life, 2 minutes, and you will never have, again, all these cities here, sitting here, ready for answering to any of the questions you may have. So up to you to take this opportunity or not. I will start by a question to the city, to the Lyon Métropole, not the city, but Lyon Metropole. So I was curious to know how this system is different from other systems, because you're speaking about like paradigm change, right? And how it can be spread. Can it be spread to any other of the cities sitting in this table today? And how?
Hello. So how this is different? Today, in order to provide a service, we have to collect personal data, and we have to ask the consent in a very defined perimeter. But as this is a reversed kind of paradigm, and the data is in a personal space where only the user has access, it makes a difference because he can just do cross-referencing data in many different ways that us, public institutions or private organizations can. Not even Google can mix all this amount of data because it's just not legal. So here the difference is that as the user has the control of it, he can we can create many different innovative services that we can not even imagine today.
You want to complement the answer?
Just about the spreading, three quick points. First one is open source. We talk about a lot of open source, and it's very important. It's very important to use open source software, but to open source everything we do as well. So as you maybe have seen on the presentation, it was a bit quick, but everything we do in Lyon is open source at forge.grandlyon.com, and everyone can use what we've done, and it's quite easy to do. And if some of you would like to have a little bootstrapping about putting on a self-data platform, we'd be really happy to share some insight. But everything is Dockerized, everything is very easy to deploy. The second one is about APIs and open ID protocols, open authentication protocols. Everything should be made according to the standards so that data sharing would be very easy. And the last one would be about tech network, because in cities there is a network like here. Cities exchange a lot about uses, about stuff, but not about technical stuff. And maybe we should more exchange about technical viewpoints, because for now that's more the vendors and more the private sector which owns the technical viewpoint, and maybe that should be a little bit moved towards the cities and local government.
Any other thoughts here on that? No?
I would just add that, I mean, for us, the opportunity to take solutions that have been developed in cities and to bring them to other cities is really one of the reasons that we exist. So we'd love to learn more about what you're doing and look forward to sharing that with other cities.
Okay.
About the sharing things, because it's very important to talk about it, but because when we put all our project, the first thing that we've done is to check what is the best practice everywhere in other cities. So we're working with Lyon about their open data strategy and platform. We work with Nantes in the north of France. We have a lot of speech with New York City. 2 times I've been to New York to speech with the person who replaced him. We work too with Boston and of course another city in Quebec and Canada to see exactly what is the best practice. After that, we just implement in the context of Montreal. So I think it's important to share all these things between cities everywhere in the world to get the best standards. And in that fact, the coalition is very important to share all the best practice. So if we can have a lot of city in the coalition, it's going to be better, because actually the states everywhere in the world are not aware to give the right power to city to get the agility and the flexibility to move very faster, because the big company has the finance, the technology, and the power to go very faster than the city. So if we cannot have a coalition who can influence the states, it's going to be very difficult to give the guarantee to citizens that we're protecting their data. So it's very. I think it's a good solution.
Good. Maybe after this table, you can also work with the city of New Orleans and share with. So I think we have a question here.
From my point of view, we are now in the phase of making these declarations of digital rights and maybe also making small experiments about the transparency, how to achieve citizen participation and so on. But what do you see on our roadmap next? How do we kind of make it comprehensive? How do we make sure that there is no data that the citizens don't have access to? Because they very easily kind of are created just by accident, just by forgetting the my data principles.
You're right, and we don't have the control about what private company can do and collect. For example, there's a weather channel in Canada, who is the greatest company. You have the most data on citizens, because when you're connected your phone to see what is going to be the weather today, they see exactly where you're going everywhere in the day. And after that, they sell this information to company to get publicity when you get access to this platform. And so it's obvious to see exactly how far you can go with data. And citizens are mostly aware to give the authorization to a private company to get access to their own data, but are not really confident to give the same authorization to the cities. So we have to build our credibility to be sure that we're protecting, and I think we have to work on the principle of the declaration, because it's important to us to give confidence on citizens.
Okay, so the time is really up. We might get one more question, but in 1 minute, max. So I think there was a question there, but just keep it really super short and the answer super short, please.
Yeah, hi there. I'm a fourth-year student currently majoring in urban studies, and my question to the panel is, the traditional models of governance right now we have, I think, are going to transition and change in these upcoming years as we have private corporations and other organizations coming into cities, right, implementing different strategies in partnership, right, with city government. And my question is, what do you think are maybe the possible different threats in having more like quasi-type government, where we have more corporations, playing that type of role in the cities where you live?
Okay, so
I'm going to give them just a
30
rapidly.
seconds,
Yeah,
max.
it's the principal threat is sidewalk project in Toronto, I think.
Okay.
I would say have to be intentional and very careful about who you're sharing your data with. And I encourage governments to talk to their departments as they engage with new vendors and buy new cloud-based applications, so that they understand how data is being aggregated in cities. So we have a tendency to, or we have a risk of making our public data personally identifiable when it's combined. So understanding what your departments are doing, how they are engaging, what data is leaving the city is really the city's responsibility to avoid that type of risk for our data.
Okay.
Just a quick note. It is very simple to pass from a smart city to an evil city. So take that in mind and work on your projects with privacy by design standards and models, and take that just in consideration.
Okay, so I'm sorry the time is up, but the good news is that these guys are very nice and willing to reply to any of the questions you may have. You can approach them after the session. And I would ask for a round of applause for our panelists, please. And I will ask Esteve to join stage to close the session. If you want to just give the final remarks? No? There's no final remarks?
Okay.
Fine. Okay, we're changing.
Well, we have seen lots of approaches from data, from the technical perspective to how to balance this tension between privacy and the use of data. I hope that you like. It's a space for discovery yet. We really don't know which are the best policies. So all this approaches could be wonderful and could be really interesting, and there is more work to be done. So let's go ahead with our work. Thank you.
Thank you.